An important skill that every beginning tarot reader needs to start thinking about as soon as possible is an understanding of the dimensions that are in the minor suits. The major cards, with their characters, with their positioning of roles next to each other, gives us a pretty clear idea of how to reflect on those roles, what they might mean to us in our lives. They start conversations immediately. But whether you are working with a Marseille-style deck or a more recent style of deck, having a sense of what features come along with each of the suits will give you a richer interpretation of every card in those suits, whether they have a full illustration on them or you're working with a more traditional pip-style deck. The guide to the suits is not only in the aces that I just showed you, but also in the world card. Now, not every world card is going to look exactly like this. I've seen renditions of the world card that are the universe, that have more to do with a kind of cocooning, as we see in some decks, that relate more to this shape as an egg. I've seen a lot of varieties. Not all of them have these representations of the suits in the corners. When we're talking about how the minors connect with the trump cards, this card tells you how that works. If the trump cards represent the freedom of the spirit, the ability to dance from one situation to the next, one inner reflection and type of self to the next, then the suits represent the situations that we are dancing through, as well as the energies that we are utilizing to make that dance effective. What inspirations, what concepts we are taking on and reflecting in order to live with ease. So the world card represents this totality of the tarot in a single card. And since it does that, we can utilize it as a guide to understanding what's going on in those minor suits by comparing the symbols in the suits with the creatures in the four corners. So to start here with the bull corresponds to coins, seen in some decks as pentacles, as discs. We start with the basic symbol of the suit and the way that it appears in our life as a thing. So in this case, if we're talking about coins, coins are money, but the coins that exist are all minted in different places. They are metals that are taken from the earth. They may not be a pure metal, so you might have a less valuable metal that's covered with a more valuable one in order to give it more of an appearance of value. Metals come from the earth, coins lay flat on the ground. This particular image of a central circle with layers of circles in it has been used in lesson teaching decks from well before the time of the Marseille Tarot. And these lesson decks presented this image as the material world. So that's how we know, between the flatness of the coin, its metallic nature, its existence as a symbol of abstract exchange of value, that what we're talking about here is not just money, but also earthiness. The suit relates to concepts that make us think about material stuff, the heaviness of material things, metal in its raw form, just like coins are value, but not value you can eat. They represent value you exchange, so it's this raw, abstract value rather than value that's been developed into something that you can immediately use to survive directly. The coin is not the land, but it represents the value that comes out of the land. So in this way, we can think about geography, our perspective on it, how we position ourselves in relation to material things. I like that in the Marseille deck, you've got these curlicue flowers growing out in 4 directions on the coin. In this way, it mirrors the corners that we have in the world card. The energy that we understand as physical beings all in some way relates to its foundation, its positioning in our material reality. It is very difficult, if not arguably impossible, for us to really understand anything that doesn't have some kind of material correspondent, some physical anchor in our sensations, in metaphors that we use. We need physical stuff to understand the world that we're a part of. And coins relates to that physical foundation. So I've given you some examples of stuff that could relate to the suit of coins when the cards come up in readings. Money, certainly, your physical body, physical geography, the land around you. Then there are also abstract things that coins can relate to. Your concept of value, your feelings of comfort, because we need physical stuff, whether that's food or furniture to sit and lay on, blankets to keep us warm, a house that keeps us safe from the elements. We need these things in order to feel comfortable. So coins relates to how we satisfy our desire for comfort. How badly do we need that? How much do we need? Coins relates to our sense of physical health, which, it is a concrete physical thing. How does your body work? But then there's also this question of how do you feel, which is much more abstract and subjective. What are your expectations for health on any given day? They're probably not the same as every other person that you know. And then from a more spiritual standpoint, we can take a look at the symbol on the world card in the bull. The bull has been an ancient symbol of divine characters, of spirituality in ritual, as the creature, in some contexts, that is humble, close to the ground. It is powerful but slow-moving. The bull is not going to do anything that it doesn't want to do. It is stubborn. When it moves, it is like an avalanche or an earthquake. It can't really be stopped, and it is so massive that it affects a great number of the things around it. Changes in what the bull wants or what the bull does tend to have quaking, reverberating effects. The bull relates to lunar goddesses and gods in the crescent of its horn. It has related to any deity that has an earthy part to its domain. So deities of agriculture, of anything that grows out of the ground, of work, of being close to one's relationship with tilling the soil, transforming it. All of these things relate to the bull. And so the suit, in a spiritual sense, relates to our relationship with the earth, what we do with what it produces, as well as how we care for the land around us and show our respect for deities of the land. Now, I read the world card as moving in this direction because if you look at the Wheel of Fortune card, that's the direction that the animals on it are pointing. Also this same way, which this video may come out backwards, but it is counterclockwise in the Marseille deck. So that means we're moving on from the bull, earth, coins, to the lion, which is the suit of staffs. Now we see a distinction in the depiction here, in that whereas the coin is central, it doesn't seem to be supported by anything. It's almost as if we're looking at the coin while it is laying on the ground from the top, looking down at it. But in the case of the staff, it is being held in a hand. And Alejandro Jodorowsky likes to think about this ruffle here in a circle as kind of being the way that a reference to coins producing the energy of the staff. In that wooden things, trees, branches, they grow out of the ground. And we need a foundation to keep our feet on, something that is grounding us in order to utilize our energy and make it effective. So the ground supports the growth that we need to be alive, to put our energy into the world and change things. Physically, staffs relate to anything that we use as a building tool, as a support to the way that we use our energy. So literally as a staff that you would use to walk. It can also be represented as a club, something that you just grab off of the ground and utilize to increase the amount of force that you can exercise. So we have this sense of being impetuous, of wanting to get your energy out in the most powerful way possible immediately. Physically, staffs also have to do with forests, with old growth, with the way that plants tangle around each other, and also the way that they exude an energy that helps them to avoid each other. If you are in a large old forest and you look up at the branches, the trees generally are going to leave a gap between one tree's branches and the other so that the light can filter down, get to the leaves. They have a sense of how they are growing together. Staffs also have to do with the way that we spend our time. Growth happens over periods of seasons, and wood, unlike flowers, unlike crops, it continues to accumulate and toughen itself over time as long as it continues to be alive and continues growing. Time transforms the potential of staffs. Staffs also have to do abstractly with the energy of wanting to have things and do things right now. As we see in this explosion of energy around the staff, wood is typically what people have burned for fire. And in the ancient world, there was this sense that fire was contained within things, and igniting it let it out. And I like that the inside of the staff is red here, reflecting that sense that there is energy within this staff, as well as its representation of something that produces leverage, produces force, allows a person to stand up for a longer period of time, walk for a longer period. It supplements energy and provides it in some ways. So that's why staffs have to do with growth, with pushing your willpower into the world, with this fiery element. Though physically, as far as stuff goes, we have wood, we have growing things, and we have the progress of growth over time. How a child gets taller, how a person becomes physically different as time affects them. The way that we break down food into energy that we use and incorporate it into our body. So if the suit of coins and earth provides that food, is the resource, staffs is more about how we are utilizing it and transforming it. Physically, staffs also have to do with work, working together, combining energies into something that is greater than what one individual can do by themselves. Abstractly, staff has to do with passion, with creativity, with the desire to express yourself and put something into the world that reflects your internal nature, who you are, how you want to respond to the world by making something that then the world has to respond to in kind. So in that sense, it also reflects friction, that something happens, you get a sensation, and you get excited, you want to put something forward that will be then a sensation for others, that will feel like a happening that inspires them to react to you. A sense of energy getting into a cycle, activating itself in other people so that the energy gets higher and higher and higher. Staffs represent the element of fire in that sense as well. That when you get enough friction, things ignite. And fire wants to move fast, it wants to consume everything that it can heat up to its level of ignition, and it will keep doing that until it runs out of fuel. So there can also be this sense of exhaustion, of running out of energy, if the passion or potential that the heat of staffs produces is not fed in some way. On a more spiritual level, staffs relates to the lion, which in a lot of ancient and classical art is put in opposition to the bull. So if the bull is this physical, earthy, more passive energy, and I say more passive because, as we said, when the bull gets excited, it can destroy things. We have avalanches, we have earthquakes, rolling boulders. It's not as if Earth doesn't do anything, but it is certainly less excitable than the lion. The lion is going to react to things. It is going to roar and put its energy out, sometimes more just to threaten and make itself known than to actually do anything. But when the lion decides that it's got to go after something, it is going to tear it apart. As opposed to the bull that will just put its mass in motion and trample it, the lion's going to stay there until it has torn whatever it's after to shreds. That's why the bull is seen as more passive, the lion is seen as more active. Even though, we will observe lions in nature just sitting around if they don't feel like anything is important enough to act on. It's more a matter of comparison rather than absolutely essentializing each of these elements. Because they're all part of the world, they're all interacting, they all affect one another. So in this sense, the lion represents the active spiritual principle. The fiery, warlike nature of deities that represent doing things, strong energy that wants to make itself known, and that won't just stand there if it's taunted or if it feels like something is offending it in any way. It's got to respond. It will be heated up with its own sense of needing to do things. It's how we get things done. And as far as the deities go, it is the protector, it is the force that makes sure that energy is continually cycling in the world and that transformations are happening. So from here, earth, fire, we go to air, represented by the eagle. That element is seen in the suit of swords. We see that, again, we have a hand holding the representative icon of the suit. And it's not coming out of a perfect circle, it's more coming out of a ruffle with variable sized points here, and it's almost as if the hand is reaching out of some mass of energy or a much messier section of cloth, and from the side rather than from the center. The heat of fire changes the air around it. The sword comes up and pierces this crown. There is a laurel of olive and also one of actual laurel. I think I got them the wrong way here. But these ferns represent abundance and wisdom as well as victory. And you see that the motes here are pointed kind of in more variable directions than what you've got on fire, showing their airiness. They change quickly and swirl around rather than going just from bottom to top. Swords represent thought. They represent tools. So the planning that goes into considering a situation, figuring out what kind of tool is going to enact the transformation that that situation requires. After doing something many times, sitting back and thinking, well, wait, what would make this easier? What could I give to somebody else to show them the way in which this needs to be done through a physical object that helps them do it? The sword also indicates symbols of authority, of power, and of social station. If you think about the medieval or Renaissance time period that these symbols were being discussed in, it wasn't like everybody who had a sword was threatening everybody around them all the time with it. But if somebody had a sword on in a social situation, that gave them a certain gravity, a certain social station within that situation because they were armed. And if they had a very fancy sword, that would mean something different than somebody with a crudely made sword. The other thing about the symbol of swords is that between two guys with swords, training matters a lot in who is going to overcome the other. The ability to think about how to use that sword mattered a lot. Experience would make a big difference in any conflict between swordsmen. That's why swords relate to planning, forethought, thinking, and being able to quickly respond in the moment to what somebody else is doing. Having a sense of strategy, of tactics, of positioning. So while swords has this more precise element to it, and also a more intellectual element to it than the other suits, it also has to do with things that don't last for very long. Tools change over time. What we want to use to get the best out of a situation is continually being improved on year after year. And we see that process happening faster in our own lives than it's ever happened before. Tools also wear down. They don't last forever. And sometimes we stop using a tool not just because there are better tools, but because its purpose is obsolete. We don't do the same things that we used to do that made that tool necessary. So tools have this ephemeral quality, just like the wind does. It can have incredible force as it passes through, but it doesn't last forever. All of these aspects have to do with the suit of swords. So physically, we got tools. We also have written language. The way that we are able to take ideas and reproduce them in some kind of document that stays, whether you're carving them in rock or writing them on paper, writing graffiti on an overpass. All of these things reflect thought of the moment and require some kind of linguistic or interpretive skill to get any meaning out of. Swords also can relate to storehouses of intellectual information and places where people are just talking about abstract ideas on a regular basis. Schools, universities, places of training, clubs where people are getting together to talk about a very specific concept and develop an idea. On the more abstract level, we've already talked about a lot of things, from ideas themselves to processes of thinking, systems of logic, words, the way that they're used and change, as well as that ability to think ahead. So abstractly, our capacity to plan, consider what might happen next, and utilize those expectations and possibilities in our best interest. On the more spiritual level, we look at the symbol of the eagle. Typically, deities associated with eagles are seen in a capacity of leadership because they see things from a wider view. They can go far up, look at the full picture, and get a sense of how things relate to each other from that bird's eye. Generally, the sense of the eagle is that its distance also means that it has to be very particular about how it acts. It acts quickly and swoops down, grabs what it wants, and then goes back up high. Its presence in the world does not last for very long. And so that's why we think of these sky gods like Jupiter, like Odin and Thor, as coming down among people, having a big effect while they're there, and then going back to this realm of having their higher view of everything else. And so often they have to be interpreted in a more abstract sense because they're not around as much. We feel their effects, but their presence is less direct. And there's also a sense that they have more wisdom, that they understand things from a more complete view because they are able to take that higher viewpoint. And finally, we move to this angelic character that represents the suit of cups. Cups relate to anything liquid, certainly, but also situations where people are sharing and where they are coming together in order to enjoy hospitality, food, drink, social situations that mix people into one context. You see that the cup here seems to have some kind of a city on top of it, which relates to that sense of social mixing and people having a place that draws them to one spot, so that they can enjoy the resources that are possible there. Now, I think about the fact that cities often are built on rivers, just because that was a place that people were all coming together. They had access to water, and that water provided transit, resources, food, the necessary water itself, and that brings people to it. that makes them want to be there and create a permanence about that abundance. So physically, cups have to do with water itself, with objects that have to do with hospitality. So places where people are coming together, like taverns, food halls. It also relates to churches and temples, because even way before churches were a place where people just came to worship, temples were a place where people would go to feast. And most sacrifices weren't just a matter of letting the blood out of an animal and getting rid of it, but they were also barbecues. The priest would sanctify the animal by the way that it was killed and by the way that every part of it was treated. And then the meat would be shared out among everybody else. In some cases, it'd be the only meat that folks got were at the temple. So there was this sense that people were going to get what they needed, that there would be a reason to be together, and that everybody would feel much more comfortable and satiated. And so the way they interacted with each other would be through a lot more comfort, happiness, generally a greater sense of conviviality. And big surprise, usually the big temples were at places near rivers. So that concept of coming to the water to get together has a lot to do with this suit. And I'll also have you note that the tops of these crenellations here in the city, they come to points. So again, to reference Jodorowsky, he'd say that that's one way to see how we go from swords to cups. You almost see that there's that crown-like triple structure there that the point is poking out of. Because we have this sense of people coming together and stuff that people are sharing, not only are public spaces a part of what's in cups, but abstractly it also has to do with the accumulation of time in a social sense and in an emotional sense. With water, we don't just have the fact that we need it to live, but also its concept of depth. That you can see the surface, but you don't always know what's beneath the surface, and that can be very important in your sense of how to engage with that water. As people have more to do with the oceans rather than the seas and rivers, there's this sense of intense depth that relates to our emotional life. That there are currents, there are things deep within the sea that we can't see directly, but that are obviously having an effect on everything else that goes on, not just in the locality of that sea, but in the whole world. So this interaction between what is hidden, what is mixing, and the greater flow of life all have to do with the suit of cups. So as I said, physically we're looking at things related to hospitality, places where people come together, as well as beverages, foods, treats that give us strong emotional feelings. Abstractly, we go then into emotion, into concepts about mixing and how things dissolve or are together when you put them in the same body of liquid, as well as the concept of flow and, opposed to that, stagnation. Is the cup full of something that is rank and sour or even poison, or was it drawn from a source that recently was flowing in a healthy way? The sense of intoxication can also be related to cups, and that can be emotional or physical intoxication. Cups has to do with the way that things blend, whether those are social or the way that each part of a meal is carefully selected in order for it to be enjoyed as a whole. So if swords has to do with cutting, separating things into their logical parts and figuring out how they go together, cups brings things back together again and talks more about that collective experience that individually they can't provide, but blending and connected, they become something that is different than the sum of their parts. And on the spiritual level, we have the angel, this character that in some ways is protecting us. Our subconscious and unconscious concepts of ourself, they lead us to do the things that reflect who we are, that enforce ourselves in ways that we don't always recognize. And we need that unconscious consistency in order to be who we are. And there's also this concept that the guardian angel knows your whole self, from the surface down into the more complex secret parts of who you are that you might not be able to explain. And so the guardian, with their sense of depth, is able to guide you through the flow in an appropriate way. And also the sense that there is this connection between hospitality, gathering together, and spirituality, that where good people are gathered, you also have good spirits who are protecting the community, who are enforcing the good things that community brings, and giving us repeated reasons to get together and enjoy being human in social aspects. Cups and water connect back to coins and earth in that the way that we feel about things and the experiences that we have with them emotionally then affect how we use them and that sense of value and comfort. That if we put our emotions into the stuff around us, we have good experiences or negative experiences, that's going to change how we invest our resources and transform physical objects in order to have more of those experiences or less of those experiences. Understanding these physical, abstract, and spiritual aspects of each of the suits will help you both as a better reader, where you are talking about these cards with others, as well as a stronger source of wisdom for yourself and in understanding how to take the lessons of the tarot and apply them to your life, even when you don't feel like a reading is necessary. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I am happy to offer private lessons if that is something you feel you need to supplement these materials, and I am more than happy to schedule readings with you if you would like more personal wisdom from the Marseille sources that I've used. Thanks again, and take care.